Thank you, Fatima, and thanks to everybody coming today. We want to open it up for questions. Before I do that, I want to hit a couple of key points that I think were critical in today's briefing. Not the least of which is just a fun anecdote. David talked earlier about how education for women had been viewed more than 100 years ago. Interestingly enough, that's part of how AAUW got its start. We've been around since 1881, and the first research report that we did, many of you have seen research from us over the years, the first research report we did, released in 1888, actually proved beyond a reasonable shadow of a doubt that educating women did not indeed shrink their reproductive organs. And they were able to use AAUW members themselves who were in fact being fruitful and multiplying, and so it was not something that was an issue. So we have a great history in that. In terms of some things that I think are really key points to take from this, number one, I love David's points about brain elasticity, right? And what that means to me is that our opportunities are in many ways our opportunities can expand or they can contract based on stereotypes, based on what doors are opened, right? So that the brain has this wonderful power to adapt and to learn and to expand and learn new things. But if you actually expect that a certain gender will do one thing and the other gender will do the other, if you rely on those stereotypes, particularly in an educational setting, in many respects what you get is a self-fulfilling prophecy, right? So for instance, when we talk about different tracks for boys and girls in science, I had a great example from North Carolina recently where the boys went outside and dug for worms and were doing that kind of thing, and the girls stayed inside and analyzed the composition of their makeup. Now, again, in terms of what the expectations were, what opportunities were given, I guarantee you there were girls who wanted to go out and dig in the dirt, and who knows, there were probably men who wanted to know what the heck was in their makeup. So I think that, when we think about how we put this together, and when you hear folks today who talk about brains of boys and girls being so different, and so we have to educate them differently, think about what David said, because a lot of what they're saying sounds like 100 years ago. Sounds like that same old stereotypical nonsense, which in fact does not create room and flexibility to let the brain expand and take advantage of those opportunities. The other thing that I think is critical for you as legislative assistants and people working in congressional offices looking at federal program development and appropriations is that there are some programs that exist to try and get to the climate issues that Kathy so skillfully talked about. But they are pitifully small, right? The NSF advance grants, 7 a year. Think about how much more progress we could make if we had more of those grants available, right? The Title IX compliance reviews that both Kathy and Fatima referred to. That is something that Senator Wyden really worked on to try and get in NASA. But think about how many other federal funds go to schools for research, from CDC, from NIH, from the Department of Education, from HHS, from Defense, right? Where we could be saying, you need to do a Title IX review. Think about the educational opportunities just to open up the door for those folks to be thinking of, yeah, I am a federal program, I do get federal dollars, and I need to be thinking about gender equity, right? The other thing to remember with Title IX is that this is a gender-neutral law. And a lot of the things we're talking about in terms of improving things for women and underrepresented minorities are also absolutely going to help men. When we talk about the STEM fields, we can talk about women and minorities till the cows come home in terms of letting you know that there aren't enough of them and we need to give them support. But as was illustrated, the reality is we don't have enough people, period, going into these fields. And so when we talk about putting together these kinds of programs that are assistance, that provide assistance to women and minorities, it is also going to create a climate that is helpful for men as well. And that's critical, again, for American competitiveness in terms of making sure we've got enough people in the STEM pipeline to fill those jobs. The other thing that I just wanted to add before I open up to questions is that I do really want to stress that when it comes to Title IX in athletics, the only real connection there is that both STEM and athletics are covered by Title IX, right? Title IX has its own set of regulations when it comes to athletics. So you might hear people talking about, oh, they want to try and mandate how many people can go into the sciences and such. The regulations for STEM and for other educational fields are completely different, right? The only reason we point to athletics in some respects as a model is that there's been an 804% increase in the number of girls playing high school sports since Title IX came up, right? If we could get a 404% increase in STEM, think about how differently this economy would function, how differently women and minorities would be paid, the opportunities that would be open. So it's a good example to show the success of how a strong civil rights law with good public opinion and enforcement can function. But when it comes to STEM, this is a whole new field. This is a whole new way of thinking about how to apply it, right? So with that, let me open it up to questions, because I am sure that you have them. And we have, as you can see, 3 very able panelists and 1 mouthy moderator who is happy to answer your questions. Yeah.